All right, Black Stars, let's talk about violence. We're going to come back to this over and over and over again, because if you are involved in martial arts, if you are involved in skill set style fitness training, you are expecting things to go down where strength, speed, impact, agility will be called into play. A recent article from a CrossFitter said, what if the day never comes? What if the event never comes that you're training for? So learn, take your time and learn the skills properly. I don't disagree with that. But at the same time, most of us who are training have a picture in our minds of what's supposed to be going on. Now, if you are training for sport, that's almost assuredly going to come around because you're training for something that exists and you can sign up to do. If you're training for military, law enforcement, corrections, civil service type dangerous jobs, those things, almost assuredly, you're going to get into conflict. There are some things that have a greater percentage chance of happening. Those of us who are just training for the end of the world, maybe, maybe not, who knows. But the simple fact of it is, it's fun training, it's apparently useful training, and nothing else. It makes you feel like a badass and a superhero, and that rocks. But the point is that, just like I was talking about in the last video, context is everything, and you have to know what you're training for. If you are training for this level of violence where there's essentially no rules, no accountability. No rules really means no accountability. Understand that if you are going to be held accountable for anything, then you are actually operating under a set of rules. People will say there are no rules in a street fight. Well, you could very well be held accountable for your actions. Therefore, there are rules in a street fight. There may not be specific target areas and whatnot, and you may have to lethally injure somebody, but you have to be able to articulate that because society will hold you accountable for your actions. And so you have to understand that there are layers and levels of violence. And most people consider too much violence to be, a level or two and anything beyond above what they're comfortable with. I'm somewhere in the low middle in experience. I think psychologically, logically, I'm prepared for much greater, but without experience, it's hard to say for sure. But I know guys who have lived in the private security world, special operations, in law enforcement, South Arizona border patrol. These are people that face violence on a day-to-day basis. And that being the case, they understand and perceive violence in a way that even an academic like myself simply can't without first-hand experience. And so they are not only psychologically but emotionally and procedurally prepared for greater levels of violence. It's less shocking to them, they're more prepared to handle it like professionals, and they will be able to survive it much, much better than the average person. But you have to understand that not everybody's at that level, not everybody is asked to be at that level, and not everybody necessarily needs to be at that level, though take whatever level of violence you think is appropriate and escalate it up a couple of notches, because let's face it, life gets pretty damn violent. But if you are used to a sparring, dueling type art, let's say Taekwondo, it's amazingly athletic. It is a fantastic style for athletics. But the problem is, it is a sport duel type art. Lethality does not really enter into the picture. And while I have certainly seen, weapons defense classes and self-defense classes and whatnot, it's always based against the idea of somebody is coming at me face forward and I have time to prepare and understand that this is an attack. Predatory assault does not happen that way, and your Taekwondo skills will do you no good unless you can beat the freeze that happens when you're blindsided in the back of the head with a pipe, and you don't get knocked out. And you got to think of these things. Life is potentially infinitely more violent and chaotic than you could ever be trained for. Average daily life generally is not. It is that unpredictability of it that makes it so much more difficult to train for. Are there ways to train it? Absolutely. It's beyond the scope of this video. I'm not going into it right now. But I want you to understand that violence is not just this one thing of this is violence. Violence is this thing of there's violence, and then there's violence, and there's more violence, and then there's more violence, and then it just keeps on going and going and going, and there's more and more and more violence. So I want you to understand that however much you think you're prepared for, you're not prepared for enough. Prepare for more. And I swear to you, don't ever put your life on the line for the words in a book. But if I were to tell you, somebody to look at if you don't have direct training availabilities, read Rory Miller, read Mark McYoung, read the guys that they suggest. There are a number of professionals in the field that have written books and done courses and still teach classes. Look them up, get your hands on the training and start understanding this stuff, and get yourself some good psychology books and start understanding group dynamics, individual dynamics, start understanding mental disorders, start understanding things like the primal brain and the different levels of brain we have, the lizard brain, the monkey brain, the neocortex, all that. Start learning about those things and understand that life isn't a Disney movie. It can be some days, but it's not. And you're going to have to deal with the total recall moments too. Talk to you later. Good journey.